Hello and welcome, friends, to our Sutra Studies program. My name is Venerable Tarpa. And before we begin, let's take a moment to appreciate our lovely and beautiful community gathered here today. Today, I feel fortunate to sit as a member of this kind community in the safety and security of like-minded friends, sharing this present moment with others dedicated to the cultivation of goodness. Today, I'm grateful for the direction and support that this community provides, a community worthy of my time and commitment, a community where my efforts have meaning, purpose, and are appreciated. Today, I'm thankful for this community of awakening, a place to gain the knowledge and skills to improve my life, a family, a home, and a sanctuary for all of us seeking refuge from the storm. And let's remember, as conscientious practitioners, we must recognize our responsibility to the world, to strive to live skillfully while helping others to do the same, to strive to live in balance and harmony with nature and others, to strive to gain mastery over our minds and embody our true benevolent nature, to expand our hearts and minds, transcending our shared human limitations, to not intentionally harm sentient life or our planet, and to maturely accept and embrace the reality of our situation while striving to improve it. Again, welcome to our Sutra Studies program. Today, as we move on to our next sutra, I want to take some time in our first class to orient everybody to the program. I believe we have some new people that weren't in our last program. So our Sutra Studies program is a ongoing event, and it works kind of like a book club where we have we'll pick a sutra to study, and we all read it. And we come and we together we examine it and learn from it. It's an interesting program because we're kind of developing the program together as a group. This is only our second sutra. We were working on the Dhammapada before this, and so we're still kind of putting the program together and seeing how it works. So with that said, today's going to be an orientation and to just get acquainted with the text that we're going to be using, the authors, and exactly what the program involves as far as what sutras are and things like that. So I'd like to begin by explaining what sutras are. And so in the big picture, we have the Buddhist canon. And the Buddhist canon is called the Tripitaka. And Tripitaka, tri means three in Hindi and Pali, and Pitaka means basket or collection. So the Buddhist canon or Tripitaka means the three baskets. And those baskets are, I have a meme here, they are, so each collection or basket, we have the Vinaya Pitaka, we have the Sutra Pitaka, and we have the Abhidharma Pitaka. These make up the Buddhist canon. The first, Vinaya Pitaka, is training in monastic discipline, vows, and rules of conduct, but it's more than just monastic discipline. It's also lay discipline as well. And so the Vinaya has all the different vows that a lot of our Sangha have taken, and monastic vows, things like that, kind of guidelines for living an ethical life. The Sutra Pitaka is what this class is about. This is the discourses of the Buddha, the actual words of the Buddha or the teachings of the Buddha, and also early great masters and students of the Buddha. And then the third is the Abhidharma Pitaka. Abhidharma literally means study of the Dharma. And they say that it's the repository of higher knowledge and training and wisdom. The Abhidharma is considered the first attempt to arrange the Buddha's teachings into a comprehensive philosophical system. with that said, there are three Buddhist canons in the world. There's the Pali, which is used by the Theravada school. There's the Chinese, which is used by Mahayana traditions. And there's the Tibetan canon. And the Pali canon is written in Pali, while the Chinese and Tibetan canons are Sanskrit based. So they were translated from Sanskrit into their own languages. And they also include the Mahayana sutras as well. The Buddhist canon was created during the first Buddhist council, shortly after the Buddha's death, and was passed down orally. So somewhere within 100 years of the Buddha's death, all the various traditions at that time, schools of Buddhism, they all had slightly different ideas of what the Buddha taught. They all came together and they decided what exactly was going to be included in this Buddhist canon. So they did that, and then at the time, they didn't write anything down. They shared it orally, and they shared it orally with usually by monastics who chanted it, and different groups were in charge of memorizing different parts of the canon. But it wasn't until the fourth Buddhist council, some 500 years after the death of the Buddha, that the Buddhist canon was finally written down, and they believe that it was written down in Pali. There's a couple things that we need to kind of know when we're dealing with the Buddhist canon. First, as a secular group, we're open to examining all the different tradition and views of Buddhism and trying to find the truth that arises from that. And one thing that we learned when we were studying the Dhammapada was that the Buddhist canon varies greatly. Let alone does it vary within each different canon itself, but even each version varies. Simply said, there's sutras where they contradict each other in the same sutra. So the idea that the traditions like to share that these are the exact words of the Buddha, that there's no mistakes in any of the text, is really hard to believe. In fact, modern scholars believe that there's three distinct voices that you can find in these. And what they mean by that, there seems to be three distinct periods of when things were added to the sutras. And which ones the Buddha actually spoke and which ones were added at a later date, it's anybody's guess. There's scholars like Stephen Batchelor who really makes a lot of effort to try to determine which ones are more likely to be spoken by the Buddha himself. So that's something we're going to explore in this as well. And do you remember when our last class on the Dhammapada, there was a note in one of our texts that talked about, out of all these chapters and verses throughout it was something like 422 verses in the Dhammapada. They could actually only find a handful that could be traced to actual sutras. So it gives you an idea of that. And so we always want to keep that in mind. Each of the early Buddhist schools likely had their own Buddhist canon. In the past, there's been Buddhist canons that had 3 baskets, 5 baskets, and even 7 baskets. So again, it's had many transformations throughout the ages. But all in all, there's actually only 2 original collections or baskets, the Vinaya Pitaka and the Sutta Pitaka. The Abhidharma Pitaka is agreed that it's a much later addition to it, in which they tried to, Jennifer was mentioning how hard the sutras are to read. They're really repetitive, and probably because they were in chanting format, they kind of they kind of chanted like a song, where songs are really repetitive. It probably helped in the memorization, recitation of the sutras, but nevertheless, they're very hard to read. So the Abhidharma was one of the first attempts to take that knowledge and put it into a more readable context. But then it's also said that each one of the various Theravada schools, they all had their own Abhidharmas. So, but Abhidharmas are commentaries on that. So when we talk about the Buddhist teachings, we really have two collections. We have the Vinaya, which is about day-to-day life, right? It's about how to carry yourself. It's about training. And then we have the sutras, which can be thought of as the teachings themselves. So let's talk a little bit about the Sutra Pitaka. Oh, and I have it up here. Let's just flick right here. Okay. So sutra, now I have to explain one thing. In Sanskrit, they like to put R's in all the words, right? So in Pali, words like sutta, in Sanskrit, they would be sutra. And we have Dhamma and Dharma, right? So when you hear that difference in pronunciation, it's just merely the Pali or the Sanskrit. Now I'm a little confused because my studies were in Mahayana Buddhism, so I'm used to having R's in all of them. So I kind of go back and forth in my teachings. So you're just going to have to deal with that. But the meaning of the word sutta or sutra is string or thread, that which binds or holds together. So it's kind of like the string that runs through all the Buddhist teachings. And it refers to the collection of texts and discourses of the historical Buddha and other early masters. So the sutras are contained within the Nikayas. So Nikaya is the broadest term. Nikaya is the collection itself. And then each sutra is a distinct teaching or discourse of the Buddha. And so compared to a lot of other religions, one thing about Buddhism, we have mountains and mountains of text. And possibly because the Buddha lived a long life. Even 2,600 years ago, the Buddha lived to 80 years old, which is pretty astounding, right? So he had a lot of time. He had lots of time to teach and share. Of the five Nikayas, they're divided up into the long discourse, middle discourse, linked discourse, numbered discourse, and the minor discourse. The text we're going to be studying is in the linked discourse, so we'll talk about that some more. Just want to give you a little idea of how they work. And one second. The minor discourse is the last of the five Nikayas, are a unique collection. The core is set, it's a core set of early texts, to which was added a series of later miscellaneous texts, including the Dhammapada. So the fifth one are early texts, but all or sutras, but also it kind of turns into just a depository of all kinds of various texts that came at later times. The Pali canon is said to have over 10,000 sutras out of all of those collections, where the Chinese and Tibetan have those, but also an additional 600 or more Mahayana sutras. And at some point, we're going to share some of the Mahayana sutras. Another question you might have is when we posted the text we're working on. So this week, or for the next few weeks, we're going to be studying the Dhammachakkapavatana Sutta. I probably pronounce it wrong. I'm terrible with Pali. Dhammachakkapavatana Sutra. And it has a reference number, and the reference number is SN 5611. And for the longest time, I was always kind of puzzled by the reference numbers. We didn't have them in the Mahayana tradition, and these were from the Pali. And I wanted to just quickly explain what it is. What they do is they indicate what sutra they're found in. In this case, the SN stands for the Samyatu Nikayas of where this text, and then the next digits are applied to it's sharing that it's the 56th chapter and the 11th sutra within that chapter. So that's how the numbering system works. Somebody asked that in our last class, and I actually didn't have an answer. So in Buddhist teachings, there are two categories generally. There's the sutra tradition and the commentarial tradition, and what they are, what the tradition favors. So the sutra traditions are generally the Theravada tradition, and they are focused primarily on the study of the sutras themselves. They do study some commentary, but they're really focused on study of the difficult to read sutras. Whereas commentarial traditions, which are mainly Mahayana traditions, but also some Theravada traditions, are focused primarily on later masters' presentations of the Buddhist teachings. So again, the sutras can be difficult to read and sometimes irritating to read because they repeat themselves over and over again. And so many people like to read these commentaries of great masters who kind of dug into them, pulled out all the great teachings and assembled them into an easier way to study. In a sense, creating little Abhidharmas. So I wanted to tell everybody that I come from a commentarial tradition, meaning I'm not really an expert on sutras. Yes, I've read, I made it a point to read through all the sutras in my lifetime, but some other scholars are just amazing at their knowledge of the sutras. I can get by with them, both the Pali and the Mahayana. But I'm always learning. So let's talk a little bit about our program before I put you all to sleep. I know this is boring material. So our weekly sutra study program is focused on studying and reflecting on the teachings of the Buddha. The goal of this program is to gain a deeper understanding of the Buddhist teachings and how they can be applied to our daily lives. By studying and contemplating these teachings regularly, we gain insight into how to overcome suffering and awaken to our true value, our true potential, and our true benevolent nature. This program is also a great way to connect with others who share your interest in living a more meaningful and conscious life by interacting here with everybody. Okay, our text for the next few weeks is possibly the most important sutra of all. It's, again, the Dhammachakkapavatana Sutra. And that's translated as the setting in motion of the wheel of Dharma Sutra, or simply Wheel Turning Sutra, which will be the term we use because that's a lot easier than the Pali. I had to study Buddhism in English, Tibetan, and Sanskrit. And for some reason, I just can't squeeze one more language in my brain. I have so many problems with Pali. That's my goal this year, to master my Pali pronunciation. But this text is considered to be a record of the first sermon given by the Buddha at the legendary deer park in Sarnath, India, near Varanasi, India. This legendary discourse, taught to the Buddha's first 5 disciples, begins by rejecting the extremes of asceticism and overindulgence, and advocates the Buddha's middle way path and teaches it, while also sharing the Buddha's teachings on the 4 Noble Truths. I think I have another meme for you all. That's not it. I thought I have one. Maybe I don't. Maybe I'm mistaken. Let me take that off the screen for now. Oh, I see. I made a mistake. My apologies. So a couple things I want to explain. One of them is the idea. Well, first of all, modern scholars aren't quite sure if the Four Noble Truths was the first teaching of the Buddha. The traditions always assert that it is, and it makes it neat and clean because all of the Buddha's teachings are said to be held within the Four Noble Truths. So by asserting it to be his first teachings, all the other teachings roll out from that. But some modern scholars, including Stephen Batchelor, believe that it probably was taught sometime after. I'd like to explain the term turning of the wheel of Dharma. So in Buddhism, there's not one but many Buddhas, some from the past, some from the future. And then in the Mahayana tradition, they even believe that there's many Buddhas living right here among us. But there are certain Buddhas who are very special Buddhas. And the Buddha of our age, Buddha Shakyamuni, is what we call a wheel-turning Buddha. The term wheel turning means it's someone who shares the Dharma for the first time. So the idea is that the Dharma existed in the past, but was forgotten. And then a new Buddha is born into the world who again teaches this teaching for the first time in his era. And so that teaching of the Dharma we call turning the wheel of Dharma, setting the Buddha's teachings into motion. So that's what it means to be a wheel turning Dharma. Okay. And so Shakyamuni Buddha is a very special Buddha because of that. I'd like to talk about, I promise I'm going to make this whole presentation short, but I often, even my promises don't always come true. Here we go. So I want to talk about the text that we're studying here today. I got really lucky. I found some great text. It's not always easy to find texts that are really different from each other. When we mean text, we're talking about different versions or translations of the sutra. It's not easy to find some really different opinions. You know, the more of different views we have, it allows us to contrast and compare, right? This is the seat of wisdom. When we can contrast and compare ideas, this is where wisdom's derived from. And so again, I got lucky on the last Dhammapada, and I got lucky here again today. I found a text representing the Theravada, the Tibetan, and the Zen tradition. So the three that we have, the first one is by the legendary translator Bhikkhu Bodhi, Bhikkhu Bodhi is an American Buddhist monk and is considered one of the most important modern scholars of the Theravada tradition. He's from New York City, but he's wonderful. And he has tons and tons of published material as an author, translator, and editor. Very important teacher. So we're often quoting Bhikkhu Bodhi in our practices. And the second one is a Tibetan Lama, very famous, Chokyi Nyingma Rinpoche, famous teacher in the Tibetan Nyingma tradition. He is well known as a great scholar and a great meditation master. Rinpoche has authored and translated many texts on Buddhist philosophy and practice. And thirdly, representing Zen, we have Thich Nhat Hanh, who recently passed away. He was a Vietnamese Zen master, author, poet, and peace activist. He established Plum Village, a global center for mindfulness practice and engaged Buddhism. He authored over 100 books and was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by Martin Luther King. He was friends with Martin Luther King. So we have three great scholars that we're going to be examining and that should make it really fascinating. In conclusion, each Saturday we will explore a section of the current sutra and discuss and compare it with the various translations and interpretations we have chosen to study. Please always read ahead and be prepared for each class, and prepare any questions that you might have. You may have noticed that this is a very short sutra, but the fact is that the material in it is quite dense. So I'd like to really take our time with it and not just read the sutras, but do a little teaching on each one of them. As you can imagine, just the teachings on the Four Noble Truths is really extensive. So that's kind of the game plan. So we'll actually start reading the text next Saturday. Does anybody have any questions? Jennifer.
Should we read for the first actual class?
The sutra is so short, I would just read them all. There's 3 papers, or a page and a half long, each one of them. Choki Nyingma's has an introduction. He's got notes. He's got a little bit of a glossary in the back. So it's up to you. But for next week, we're going to read up to the part on middle way, and we're going to have a class on exactly what the middle way is in Buddhism. And then we'll get to the Four Noble Truths after that. Quite possibly we'll take 1 week to talk about each one of the truths. So I thought it would be cool to combine a class, teachings on each one of the aspects as well as the sutra itself.
You also put that last meme up on our page?
Yeah, I'll put the relevant memes up, yeah. And I believe, yeah, I don't think it's on the website, but yeah, I definitely will, sure. Ms. Pema?
David had a question. He said, will we have time for more discussion this time?
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. The Dhammapada was quite a text. I mean, 26 chapters, I think 422 verses. It took us 26 weeks to get through it. So yeah, we were always kind of pushed for time on that. But to be honest, this is the first time SBT is offering a Sutra Studies program. So again, we're kind of working on the program together. I'm kind of just winging it, and we'll see how certain sutras will need to be taught in different ways. But I'm always hoping for more discussion, David, yeah. Especially from you. He has the best questions. But I think it's going to be a blast. I think it'll be a lot of fun. We'll take it slow and just enjoy it, right? The sutra class is supposed to be ongoing, so we're not in any hurry at all. Yeah, and we'll make our way through. If anybody has any certain sutras they'd like to study in the future, please email them to me. We'll cover the most important ones first. Excuse me. Oh, so lovely. Oh, Miss Darcy, please.
I just thought of something. Is the Diamond Sutra, is that one of the major sutras, or is that?
It's one of the major sutras of the Mahayana sutras.
Oh,
and within the Diamond Sutra is the Heart Sutra, and that is the Mahayana tradition is founded on those. At some point we'll get into that. I thought we'd get grounded a bit in the Pali Sutras.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
The Mahayana Sutras, according to Mahayanas, the Buddha taught both the Mahayana Sutras and the Tantric Sutras within his lifetime, but they were taught in secret to only the highest, most gifted people, and then they were shared later. And that's why it appears that the Mahayana Sutras were written hundreds of years after the death of the Buddha. So most modern scholars think they were probably written hundreds of years after the death of the Buddha. But that doesn't discount that they're full of wonderful wisdom. So we'll do that, yeah. And then Tantra is even more mysterious. It clearly is just rises from the Hindu tradition between the 4th and 11th century. They actually have documentation for that because it's so much later. Yeah, but let's get a good foothold on the Pali Sutras, which we believe are actually the teachings of the Buddha. Great. Well, I hope everybody has a good understanding. We recorded this, so if some of the more technical things we talked about, you can re-listen to and kind of get a good basis for these sutras. That's important. And then we'll bring it all to the table next week. Okay, if there are no further questions, I want to remind everybody tomorrow's also a big day for us. We're getting our 10-week meditation program up and running. So we have a nice turnout so far. We have some brand new meditation instructors in training. And basically the way it works is that I give the official teaching every Sunday, and everybody's welcome to attend. And then for the instructor program, each instructor has to teach the same class sometime during the week for them to get some practice. And at the end of 10 weeks, the instructors have taught all 10 levels. And then if they're good, we'll give them an official document saying that you are really cool and special now. And so, most of the people here are already instructors. So we're really excited about that. It's going to be a blast. And if you've done the program again, it's well worth, if you've done it before, it's well worth doing again. I learn from it every time I teach it. Yeah, and it's a lot of fun, right? Okay, so hopefully we'll see everybody for that tomorrow. We'll have our meditation tomorrow at our regular time, and then our meditation program will begin. Okay, with that said, why don't we end today's class with our altruistic affirmation. May all be healthy, may all be prosperous, may all be well. May all be present, free of past regret and future worry. May all abide in constant appreciation, which is a source of great joy and contentment. May all realize their true nature and the true nature of reality, which is awakening. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Great to see you. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Thank you.
You're
Bye.
welcome.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
everyone.
Tarpa. Bye,
Anytime.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. See you.